I think we all know what it feels like to be entitled or to feel entitled. I think we all feel that way at times. Think things like, I worked out today. I should be able to go to Dairy Queen tonight. Or I deserve to kick off my shoes and watch TV. I worked 10 hours today. Those are entitled feelings. I think sometimes employers, when they're trying to hire somebody, they at times will hear entitlement from an employee. And it might show up in a statement like, hey, if I come to work for you, can I have that corner office? And, there's some entitlement in that, and I'm sure that's never attractive for employers. But I'm guessing employers struggle with entitlement too, thinking, no, you can't have that corner office. I've worked here long enough. That is mine. I've earned it. So that's all entitlement. And some of that stuff is just not really a moral issue. It's not a huge deal to go to Dairy Queen after a workout or take a corner office because you have seniority. But feelings of entitlement toward God are a big deal. They're a very big deal. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, if you've ever said, anything like this, or thought something like, I've gone to church my whole life. I've walked with Jesus. I've prayed about this, but God still hasn't brought me a wife, or He hasn't brought me a husband. Or I don't know if you've had the thought, man, God knows my heart. He knows how much I love children, and yet He has us struggling with infertility. Or, I have tried to be a good Christian. I have tried to do the best that I can, follow the script. But man, he's just not put me in a role of leadership in the church. Nobody's asking me to teach a class. Some of those feelings end up being kind of feelings of entitlement toward God and not so much other people. And they're a big deal. And one of the reasons they're a big deal is feelings of entitlement toward God, when they don't come true, can lead to some of the worst despair that we as people go through. Some of the deepest discouragement. It's one thing if we feel like a person has let us down. Like if a group of people or the people we work for, if we feel like there was a commitment there, but they let us down, that's one thing. And that's not an easy thing. But it's an entirely different thing altogether. If we feel like this life with God, this arrangement that we have with God of doing life together, that He has let us down, that He hasn't kept His word, that leads us to a place where sometimes we don't know how to get out of it. How do you deal with anger and disappointment toward God, right? So it's a big deal for that reason. It's also a big deal, and it's very dangerous because it's just wrong, meaning it's not based on truth. And our passage actually will show us this. If you want to turn with me to Luke's Gospel, chapter 17. Luke 17. And I'm going to begin by reading verses 7 through 10. And Jesus says this: Will any one of you who has a servant plowing or keeping sheep say to him when he has come in from the field, come at once and recline at my table? Come at once and recline at table. Will he not rather say to him, prepare supper for me, and dress properly, and serve me while I eat and drink, and afterwards you will eat and drink? Does he thank the servant because he did what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were commanded, say, we are unworthy servants. We have only done what was our duty. Jesus is using the servant-master relationship to teach us something about our relationship to God. Now, I think, especially in our country, perhaps in a unique way, sometimes the way that we have our dark history with slavery almost makes something like this hard to understand. But it's really good to realize that the servant-master relationship in the first century within the Jewish social structure was so different from kind of the cruel one-person benefit system of slavery that's in our history. In this system, first century Judaism, both the master and the servant had a lot of benefits from that relationship. I won't go into all of those, but there was a way that both benefited, and it was very, in a sense, symbiotic. I think it's actually more accurate and helpful to think about this in terms of like an employer and an employee. There's definitely a line of authority. In fact, that gets to the heart of the point. But it's not anything like what we think about when we think about slaves and masters. And the only reason I say that is because I think it's really important that we not see an inherent lack of fairness in this system, because anything that would keep us from being able to go with Jesus here and see ourselves as servants and see God as our master, that would be sad, because that is absolutely a part of the truth of our relationship with God. So this is for us, and I don't want to have anything standing in the way of us accepting what Jesus is teaching. So what is he teaching through what we just read? Well, let's appreciate the context here. To do this, remember back, I think it was 2 weeks ago, when we looked at the passage immediately prior to this. The disciples just made a demand of Jesus. In fact, let me just read that. If you'll look back up the page a little bit to verses 5 and 6. It says, "The apostles said to Jesus, 'Increase our faith.' And the Lord said, 'If you had faith like a grain of mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you.'" So Jesus had just told his disciples to have faith that the Pharisees and the scribes and these performance kind of religious leaders, that they don't have. Now, all of these men that are right there in this crowd, these people believe in themselves. They're banking on themselves. So when they get up in the morning, what they're running after are their wants, their desires, ways to celebrate themselves. That's their faith. They believe in themselves. This whole passage, Jesus is saying, don't be like that. Rather, believe in me. Have faith in me. Get up out of bed every morning thinking about how do I live the life that Jesus wants for me, that Jesus desires for me. And specifically, what he said right before this passage is that what I want for you, what I want for my disciples, is I want you to love your enemies. And I want you to pray for those who persecute you. And even if they're still in the act of persecuting you, I want you to follow my example, and I want you to pray for them. Specifically, what he says here is, and I want you to forgive. Forgive your enemies as many times as they might make a move back to you to ask for forgiveness. Do it every time. Now, this is a huge, demanding command from Jesus. It is. There's no way around this. This is a huge directive that Jesus is giving to us as disciples. I would go so far as to say we can't do it. We cannot do this apart from Him and apart from the Spirit of God living in us. We just can't do it. It's that big. And so the disciples respond to Jesus in this moment saying, give us bigger faith. Give us more faith. Now, there's a couple issues with what they said. Now, I want to try to represent as accurately as possible the tone of this. Jesus loves these men and women. They have faith in Him. Some may have faith the size of a mustard seed, but that's part of what he's saying is, if you've got that faith, you've got God. So he loves these people. These are gentle, loving corrections, but there's two things about what they just did that need corrected. One of which we did look at 2 weeks ago. And that's this issue of who does the big miraculous things. He said if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree in the middle of Nebraska, uproot, and I want you in California. And it would do it. And the disciples were thinking, man, give us more faith. We want to see things happen, right? We want to have that power at our fingertips. But in the response of Jesus, he's saying, the power isn't in the subject. The power is in the object. That's why he uses a mustard seed. That's a tiny little bit. But it doesn't matter if you're somebody that just faith comes so easily for you. You read a command, you see the word of God, you believe it, you do it. Or if you're somebody that, really struggles with that, but believes in Jesus and gets to this place of obedience, he's saying, either whatever faith you have, if it's real and it's in me, you got God. The infinitely powerful God that, who moves mulberry trees? God does. His point is also, who gives you and me the strength to love our enemies, like Jesus did on the cross, and to pray for them while they're still in the act of putting him to death? Who gives us the power and the strength and the capability to be able to forgive someone who offends us over and over and over again when they come back and ask for forgiveness? God does. The same God that has the strength to move a mulberry tree or move a mountain will give us the strength to forgive and to love. So that's the first correction that Jesus gives to the disciples. But this parable that we just read is also a correction. It's also a response to a heart issue that is in the disciples. And I would say it's a heart issue that we today struggle with as Christians as well. It's that instinct that we have that we can demand something of God because of how much we've done for him. Because of the level of commitment we've carried for so long toward him, we have a right to say back to God after something big that he asks us, okay, but I want you to do this for me. The parable is actually very simple. A servant serves in the field all day long, probably a 12-hour day. He's out there working. But the fact that the servant worked outside for the master all day doesn't earn for the servant rights over the master. It doesn't mean that the master finishes the day and feels indebted to the servant and now says to the servant, you sit down and I'll make you dinner. No, the servant's always the servant, and the master is always the master, and the master has all the rights. In fact, it's entirely appropriate for the master to say to the servant, we're done outside, time to go inside, make me dinner, dress accordingly. When we're done with dinner, I want you to clean up the dinner, and then you can eat. And it's entirely appropriate for the servant to say, oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I'll get up tomorrow, I'll do it again. I'll give it everything I got. And if by chance the master were to say to the servant, wow, well done today. That servant, if he's thinking appropriately, if he's thinking according to truth and in the nature of the relationship, would almost be surprised by that, would kind of gasp and say back to the master, I was just doing my duty. I mean, you're the master. I'm the servant. So this truth is so vital. This truth is about the very nature of your relationship and my relationship with our Creator, with our Father in heaven. Sometimes I think we bring a casualness to this relationship. And again, I tend to lean toward grace to us on this, right? Because as we study Jesus in the Gospels, we rightly see how loving and how friendly. I'm so thankful that he's a friend to sinners. And we see this. Think about the disciples and the apostles. Just put yourself into their shoes, because they do this too. They in the Gospels bring a sense of casualness at times. That crosses a line, like they just did. But think about it from their perspective. They're eating by this man. They are sleeping by this man. They are doing life by this man. They are with Jesus 24/7. They are with him when he gets bad breath. They are with him when he goes to the bathroom. He's approximately their size. He's approximately their age. It is all just so genuinely, truly human. And I think what happens at times is it feels so human and so close that it almost feels dangerously equal to us. And I think we do this today. I think it's so tempting for us today to think about Jesus in these categories and then really do with him what we do with each other all the time. Man, you're asking quite a bit from me. It's only fair and it's expected. I'm going to ask this of you. We have really subtle ways of doing this. Sometimes we don't say things. Sometimes we just do quite a bit for somebody, and we know that puts the expectation back on them that they need to do quite a bit for us in return. But I think we bring that casualness to our relationship to Jesus, and we think, wow, he's really asked a lot of us in this Christian life, which is true. That's probably the biggest understatement I've ever made from up here. I mean, he's asked for everything from us. You know, he wants our very lives. He wants every moment of our days to be lived for him. And I think we see that and we think about that, and we tend to bring this attitude back that, you know, it's not wrong then every now and then to just kind of expect that he'd throw me a bone, right? A little bone. Just, you know, it's not wrong to expect that he'll answer one of my prayers. I mean, I am praying with all my heart. I've got other people praying, and I'm believing in him, and I'm memorizing scriptures that address this, and I'm doing my best here. You know, he should throw me a little bone. He should do this thing that I'm asking him to do for me. But then when he doesn't throw us a little bone, he doesn't do what we've been pleading with him to do for us, doesn't solve a problem, doesn't bring a person back, doesn't, you know. Man, we end up in dark places. We really do. I've been there. The way I describe it is we end up sidelined spiritually. We end up mad at the world, disappointed with everything. I think we stop praying. We get taken out because of discouragement. I think this happened to a lot of people this last year. I really do. I think a lot of people were disappointed and angry this past year. Many still are, over a number of issues: masks, social distancing, things shutting down, over politics, over leaders, over elections. Now, I think most of us in the room, would say, wait a second, we're talking about entitlement toward God. My beef isn't with God, my beef's with people. You know, leaders of different groups would say, man, I'm just really frustrated with the people that I'm trying to lead, the people I'm trying to be good to. The followers of those leaders, man, they're upset at the leaders. They're not listening. They're not doing things right. They've really gone off course. Business owners are upset at state and federal officials. The left is upset at the right. The right is upset at the left. Cities don't like rural areas. Rural areas are frustrated with urban areas. I mean, we can go on and on and on. But here's the thing, and I'm speaking to Christians now. I'm speaking to those in the room who have put their faith in Jesus, and you have the Holy Spirit. And so the words of God in the Scriptures, you know they're true, and they resonate as true. You have genuine faith. In fact, let's go a step further. You have the Spirit of the living God in you, declaring to your spirit that the words of God are true. And what you know, if you're a Christian, down there someplace, and I think if I asked you, you would declare it as your theology. What you know down deep in your gut, by the Spirit, by the words of Christ, you know that God is sovereign. You know that God, in some mysterious way, and the more I study God, the more the mystery gets bigger. And I love it. But in some mysterious way, God is in perfect governance of all things. All things. Not a certain level of things, but all things. You know, if you're a Christian living by faith, you know God is sovereign. He is sovereign over sickness. He is sovereign over health. He is sovereign over presidents. He is sovereign over senators. He is sovereign over representatives. He is sovereign over governors. He is sovereign over school boards. He is absolutely, intimately involved in every aspect of our lives from the director's chair. There's an interesting statement that Jesus makes. It's in Matthew 10, 28 through 31. He says, "And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul." So we know who he's talking about. He's talking about those who do us harm. The extreme, or the worst might be, they might actually end our lives. They might be the ones that pull the trigger. But he's dealing in this category of those that have some degree of power, some degree of position or authority, where they actually have influence or control over us. And so they can do things that kill us, that hurt us, that frustrate us, that ruin our plans. That's who he's dealing with here. So he says, "And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell." And then he says this, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are more valuable than many sparrows." So Jesus is talking to disciples about how to think, how to do life, go through life with people who hurt us, frustrate us, disappoint us, kill us. And he says to them, they're not running things. It feels like they are. Boy, it feels like our struggle is against flesh and blood, doesn't it? It feels like they're in control. It feels like their sovereign actions as people or presidents or boards or leadership, it feels like they're ruining things for you. But he says, it's your Father in heaven who's in full knowledge and full control of everything that takes place on the face of the earth, even the intimate details. What's more intimate than 2 sparrows that are flying around in the woods, perhaps never seen by human eyes, and one of them drops dead to the ground? We'll never know about that. But Jesus says your Father knows that. And know here is more than he just sits back and sees everything. Know here carries the intimate idea of governance, ultimate sovereign governance over one sparrow falling dead in a forest when nobody else sees it. What's smaller than a sparrow? A human hair is smaller than a sparrow. You know how many human hair, how many hairs are on the head of an average person? I don't either. I looked at a few websites, and they were all over the map on that one. Some of you, and I'm not going to name names, some of you are way below average, but I think there's a look of dignity to that. Please come back next week. I shouldn't have said that. No, one website I looked at said it's about 140,000 hairs on the head of an average person. And Jesus is saying that God is in perfect knowledge and governance over every single one of those 140,000 hairs on your head if you're a full average-haired person. He knows about every single one. Have you ever been to a restaurant and found a hair in your dish? Oh, man. I love food so much, and it is a big deal to me going out to eat. We don't do it very often. When that happens, I'm like, whose hair is this? Are you kidding me? You know who knows? God knows. God knows exactly whose head that hair fell off of. In some mysterious sovereign way, God directed that hair to fall off that head, and in some mysterious sovereign way that works all things together for the good of Zeke Pipher, He's caused that hair to end up in my linguine. Here, you want to get as biblical, you want to really practice good biblical theology. The next time you're at a restaurant and you find a hair in your dish, rather than give the waitress a good talking to like she's to blame, praise God for it. No, I'm serious. That little detail of somebody's hair that you will never know how it got there, that one little detail, pick up that hair and just say, God, I don't know how this works together for my good. But you do. And you know whose hair this is. And I praise you for it. It's a reminder to me that you are the one in perfect control. Now, we're being a little bit silly here, but not really. Because that's the point that Jesus is making. And this is the point that applies to us. Whatever losses, whatever hardships, whatever pains that we went through in 2020, or that some of us are still going through in 2021, whatever we've gone through happened ultimately, sovereignly, mysteriously, by the perfect direction and governance of our infinite God who loves His sons and daughters beyond what you and I will ever know. We will study His love for all of eternity together, and we will never get to the bottom of it. And you know this. You know this if you're a Christian. If you believe the Scriptures and you have the Spirit of God, that when you read the Scriptures, the Spirit makes them resonate as true. You know that God is sovereign. So it's time for a little intellectual honesty on this. We must see that when we get so wrapped up in our offenses, in our anger, in our disappointments, because we're not getting what we want, we're not getting our way, and we get bent out of shape, our issue, we may say it's with a person or a group, but our issue is with God. Some of you might be saying, he's wrong. My issue is not with God. It's with people. It's with the politicians. It's with the leaders. It's with the church. It's with the school board. It's with the doctors. It's with the health department. It's with the election officials. My problem isn't with God. It's with them. You know what God would say to you? You're wrong. Your problem is with me. Your problem is with me. Because the way you're making it about you versus them, you are directly missing and directly disobeying a wealth of my direct commands to you. To submit and honor your authorities. To be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution. You see, God would say, your problem is with me, and it's created a problem with our relationship, because God expects that knowing Him and knowing His sovereignty, which He has declared and made so clear in the Scriptures, He's given us the Spirit to know it's true. God expects that knowing His sovereignty will cause in us a peaceful, joyful, easy trust and submission of those whom He has placed in leadership over us, including this current administration. Whether they lead perfectly or not, whether they do what they do from a heart that wants to honor Him or a heart that wants to glorify themselves. God expects that knowing His sovereignty will matter. So our issue, it truly is with God, and it truly is an issue of faith. An issue of actually believing what He has said to be true, even if we don't want to believe it, we don't like it, we don't agree with it, emotionally we struggle with it. It's faith, because that's faith. It's believing that what Jesus said and what Jesus did is true. You can take it to the bank every time. And here's what He says is true. Back to the parable. No matter how much we do for God, no matter how much commitment we carry for Christ, no matter how much time we spend serving His people, or praying, no matter how much money we give, God never owes us anything. And here's why. And this is as true for me as it is for anybody on the face of the earth. Here's why God never owes us anything. It's because with Adam and Eve's sin and with our personal sin, we have sinned against an infinitely holy and perfect God. And we deserve, if God owes us anything, what we deserve is His wrath, His punishment. What's the punishment for sinning against God? It's death. And it's death in every possible way. Adam and Eve should have been blotted if God was just. He's fully infinitely just. But if He was just, then all of humanity would have been blotted off the face of the earth in that moment when Adam and Eve sinned. What that truly means for every single one of us. You may be here this morning and you don't even believe in God. And you're like, I don't know how I ended up here, but I've said to people, I do not believe in God. This applies for every single one of us. If you're alive right now to hear this and be a part of this moment, it is because God, in His mercy and in His love, is giving you countless gifts every moment of your life, every heartbeat, every impulse to the brain, every breath you take in. God is giving infinite gifts in this moment. That means that you and I get to be alive right now. We refer to this as common grace. When He causes the rain to fall perfectly on a Christian's field and perfectly on somebody's field who hates God, He gives common grace. If you're alive today, it's because your life is one perpetual set of receiving gifts from God. Because what we actually deserve is the sentence of death in every possible way. Now, to go a little bit beyond that, again, to speak to the people in the room who have faith in Jesus. They're not better people, but you've put your faith in Jesus. You not only have the gift of life every moment of your existence, you now, for all of eternity, have the gift of spiritual life every moment of existence throughout eternity. But the same is true. every moment, including this one, that we get to love the Word of God together. We get to enjoy being together, right? We get to know the Father and cherish His heart for us and celebrate the Son. Every moment that we get that experience is just a plethora of gifts that God is giving us. This is why it's not overstatement to say that everything about our lives, whatever God brings into our lives, whatever He takes out of our lives, whatever He does do for us that we ask, whatever He doesn't do for us that we ask, every part of our lives is a gift. It's all grace. And if everything is a gift, by the way, it's a free gift for us. It cost Jesus His life. It cost the Father the life of His Son. But for us, it's a free gift. And if everything is a free gift in our lives, then what God does that we like, what God does that we don't like, we would see all of it as, thank you, Lord. I don't deserve any of this. I got to this place in the sermon, working on it, and I'm like, man, I believe this, I know this, but why do I struggle? Why do we still struggle so much with these feelings of, man, God, you should do this for me now. You should fix this now. You should cause these people to come around and do what I want them to do now. Why do we struggle with that? And I started asking that question. I realized the very next thing that Luke writes about gives us the answer to that. It really does drive us into the question of what do we want most in life? Do we want God to do things for us? Or do we want Jesus? Look at verses 11 through 19. On the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee, and as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers, who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices, saying, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. When he saw them, he said to them, Go and show yourself to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. And he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus answered, Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? And he said to him, Rise and go your way, your faith has made you well. Only the priests could declare someone clean or unclean. And that designation had huge implications for that person. If they were declared by a priest to be unclean for any reason, leprosy was one of them, then it effectively removed that person from society. They couldn't work. They couldn't be around people. But even spiritually, it removed them from society because, and these lepers would have believed this about themselves too. The idea in that day was if you had leprosy, that was God's judgment and punishment for your sin. And that's why these lepers, believing that, they come up to Jesus and they ask him for mercy. And he gives them mercy. He tells them to go and to show themselves to the priest. And there's this idea that when they exercised that degree of faith, again, we've defined faith as believing in the words of God. So much you do it. When they believed in Jesus to that degree, he chose in that moment to heal them. So what's going on with the one that returns? And the 9 who don't? Throughout Luke's gospel, as we've been studying, we've seen all sorts of people. And again, that's what makes it feel so real. There are all sorts of people. There are all sorts of people here this morning. There are some people in the gospel who are against Jesus. There are some people in the gospel who end up helped by Jesus. And I think it's really fair to say they like him. They're maybe amazed by him, pretty astonished by him. They like what he's done for them. But then there's a different group. There's the group that actually ends up disciples. And these are typically represented in the Gospels. I mean, we see these people, the disciples, they stand out because the theme with them is they are always praising Jesus. I mean, they are, if I could put it this way, they are way more excited about Jesus than what Jesus just did for them. They're just excited about Jesus. That's what the moment is showing us. That's what the one leper here, one healed leper here is showing us. It's that faith, again, this is all about faith. He's defining faith. Faith that actually believes in God. True faith wants Jesus more than what he's done for us or what he might do for us. The other 9 lepers, they were healed. They got what they wanted. That was awesome. It's not a small thing. They got to re-enter life, re-enter work. They, in a sense, were now declared to all of society that sin has been finally forgiven by God. But they got what they wanted. And you know what? I don't think it's going too far to say that I'm guessing that they really liked Jesus. And they felt very grateful to him. And I think if they would have been out and about and Jesus would have been coming along with his disciples, they would have stopped and said, "Oh, it's so great to see you. By the way, thank you for what you did for me." But this one leper, who is now the example of faith, right? This one leper saw, through what Jesus did, saw that this is God, right? Like, this man in front of me is God. In him is life. I want him. Leprosy or no leprosy, I want him. Getting what I want or not getting what I want him. Are you kidding? Being with him, knowing him, that's life. Jesus says to this leper, "Rise and go your way, your faith has made you well." It's a really interesting statement because there's a sense in which that's true for all 10. I mean, they believed Jesus. And to that response of believing in Jesus, he did make them well. He healed them of their leprosy. But what he's saying to this one man is very, very different. He's saying, your faith that would come back, your faith that would want me more than this declaration of being clean and this, that faith has made you well in the place and in the way that every single human being most desperately needs to be made well. And you are now forgiven by God and redeemed and placed into right relationship with the Father. These two passages just go together. It's like a 1-2 punch. If you have the Son by faith, you have the Father. And if you have the Son by faith and you have the Father, you have the power of God, period. It's going to work in you, it's going to work through you, and it's going to work at the direction and the bidding of God, not us. But if you do have the Son and you have the Father and you have salvation, may we never lose sight of the fact that everything in our lives, everything, good, bad, ugly, otherwise, everything in our lives is a gift. And it's a gift given to us by an infinitely holy God who owes us nothing, and that there's a peace, There's a peace and a joy and a contentment of soul. I think it leads to a unity with people. There's a peace that comes from believing that. It's a peace many people lived without this last year. But there's also a perspective that comes with this too. Because if you have Jesus by faith, you've got everything. And whether God does what you're asking him to do or he doesn't, or whether a person hurts you or takes your life even, man, if you've got the Son, you have eternal life. You have everything. Nothing can separate you from your Father and from his love. There are a lot of religious people out there in churches right now who love what God has done for them, really like God. There's a few people out there that see what God has done for them and have the faith to say, man, if I've got Jesus, I've got everything. You can give, you can take. I got Jesus. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your love and your mercy and your grace toward us. May we, by your Spirit, just continue to have eyes to see it and to have our lives just be lived in that peace and that gratefulness, that joyful submission. Yes, the joyful engagement, but the joyful submission that Jesus, you yourself modeled for us. We just pray for more of that in our lives. And we ask in Jesus' name, amen.